All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We are looking at a situation today that has reached an absolute boiling point. It's May 3rd, 2026, marking day 64 of the US-Iran conflict. And honestly, the stakes have arguably never been higher. We're literally standing on the precipice of a major turning point. We've just seen a massive diplomatic move from Tehran, an immediate counterreaction from Washington, and now a ticking clock that the entire world is watching. We're going to break down exactly what is happening, sticking strictly to the cold hard facts. We'll look at the terms of this new peace proposal, the economic shockwaves rippling across the globe, and that very real countdown happening over the next 72 hours. To really grasp the gravity of where we are today, we've got to look at the rhetoric coming from the very top. Following the delivery of Iran's new 14-point peace proposal, the U.S. response was completely uncompromising. The U.S. president explicitly laid out two paths: strike a deal or choose a devastating military conclusion. I mean, there is zero ambiguity here. It establishes the extreme existential stakes hanging over these negotiations. This isn't just diplomatic posturing, it's a public acknowledgement that absolute military force is being weighed right alongside a diplomatic resolution. And then, almost immediately, we saw a direct counter-threat from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And what's super fascinating about this is how it perfectly mirrors and challenges the U.S. position. Where the U.S. threatens to finish them forever, the IRGC intelligence arm frames any U.S. military operation as downright impossible. They're essentially telling Washington that a perfect diplomatic victory is off the table. Their only real choice is a bad deal or a military failure. This direct clash of ultimatums is the exact trigger for the crisis we're breaking down today. Both sides are publicly stating that the other is entirely out of leverage. So let's look at the trigger for all of this, specifically the events of the last 48 hours. To understand how we actually arrived at this standoff, we have to look at the sheer velocity of the last couple of days. Everything happened in a remarkably compressed 48-hour window. Step 1. Iran officially submitted a 14-point response to America's peace proposal. We know from Iran's embassy to Pakistan that these terms were delivered squarely through Pakistani mediators. Step 2. Even before a formal, detailed breakdown was publicly negotiated, the U.S. president stated he would review it, but quickly added, "I can't imagine that it would be acceptable," effectively rejecting the premise of the proposal right out of the gate. And that rejection leads us directly to Step 3. The IRGC officially setting a strict deadline for the U.S. military to end its blockade of Iranian ports. So the key takeaway here is that diplomacy didn't just stall, it accelerated straight into a hard ultimatum. Which brings us to the actual terms of this diplomatic stalemate. So what's actually causing this immediate breakdown? Well, when you look at the factual demands of a negotiation, you can clearly see the core of the gridlock. On one side, we have the framework of Iran's newly submitted 14-point proposal. Their demand is entirely sequential. Washington must end the war first and guarantee it won't resume. Only after that happens will Tehran even negotiate over the Strait of Hormuz and their nuclear program. Now flip that around, the absolute core red line for the United States is the exact inverse. The U.S. is demanding that Iran must give up nuclear enrichment first, before the war ends. It's like a giant impossible puzzle. One side demands the military stops before making nuclear concessions, the other demands nuclear concessions before the military stops. And while leaders are stuck in that gridlock, the fallout on global shipping and the economy has been massive. This standoff is actively punishing the entire globe. Just think about the number 95% for a second. That represents the staggering drop in shipping traffic moving through the Strait of Hormuz right now. Before this war broke out, a typical month saw roughly 3,000 vessels navigating this incredibly vital maritime choke point. In March, that number plummeted to just 154 vessels. That means 95% of the ships that normally carry the world's energy and goods through this region have simply vanished. The world's most important waterway is, for all intents and purposes, completely dead. And here's a major reason why that waterway stays empty. It's not just the physical threat of getting caught in a crossfire, it's the very real legal and financial threat of international sanctions. The U.S. Treasury Department released a strict advisory warning that any shipping companies that actually choose to pay tolls to pass through the waterway could face severe U.S. sanctions. This puts international shipping conglomerates in an impossible position. It effectively freezes maritime logistics in the region entirely and guarantees that 95% drop remains the reality on the water. Now, you might be thinking the Strait of Hormuz is a world away, but the ripple effects are literally right in your neighborhood. Let's talk about the U.S. national average for a gallon of diesel.
On February 28th, right when the U.S.-Israeli strikes began, it was sitting at $3.76. Today, May 3rd, it is skyrocketed to $5.64. And why does diesel matter so much to you? Because every single truck that delivers your groceries to the supermarket, your packages from Amazon, or your prescription medicine to the pharmacy runs on diesel fuel. The cost of this war is quite literally being baked into your delivery fees and your grocery bills as we speak. But we've got to ground this explainer in the human reality of the last 64 days, too. Beyond all the economic metrics and skyrocketing fuel prices, there is a profound human toll. 3,600. That is the sober estimate of Iranian lives lost since the U.S.-Israeli strikes commenced on February 28th. It's absolutely crucial to remember that while the economic shockwaves are global, the physical devastation and the tragic loss of life remain intensely localized for the people actually on the ground.
This human and economic toll is building rapidly across the entire global stage. You can really see how the fallout impacts different countries, proving that even nations entirely outside the direct conflict are paying a severe price. In the US, as we just talked about, it's diesel and delivery costs. But look over at the UK, a country that didn't even join this war. They're paying for it every single day with surging petrol prices at the station. In Canada and Australia, the continued closure of the strait means oil is staying above $120 a barrel, locking in record pump prices. And then in Germany, the situation is incredibly complex. They're facing an energy crisis, record fuel prices, and the really alarming withdrawal of 5,000 U.S. troops over the next year. Berlin had zero say in this conflict, and yet they're bearing massive security and economic burdens.
All of this sets the stage for a very real countdown over the next 72 hours.
We've seen the trigger, the gridlocked terms, and the devastating fallout. Now everything is converging on a very, very narrow window of time. Let's dive into the 3 key variables that are going to define these next 3 days. First, the IRGC deadline is real. If the U.S. doesn't respond to their demand to end the blockade, Iran could resume direct attacks on shipping in the strait, which would just end the ceasefire instantly. Second, and honestly kind of paradoxically, the diplomatic gap is actually narrowing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio noted that Iran's negotiators are engaged, and both sides are quietly circling a stage deal framework. Basically, reopen the strait first, talk nuclear later. And third, we have the sheer unpredictability of the rhetoric. I mean, in a single afternoon, the U.S. president said Iran wants a deal, then said America is better off without one, and then walked those remarks back entirely. That unpredictability is, in itself, one of the most volatile variables on the board. So the crucial point we are left with on day 64 is this. We've got a 14-point plan on the table, we've got crippling economic pressure hitting globally, and we have an uncompromising 72-hour deadline. The entire situation is balancing on a razor's edge between a staged diplomatic breakthrough and a catastrophic military escalation. As you look at the facts we've gone through today, consider the motivations and those strict non-negotiables of both sides. Will this 14-point plan serve as the foundation that finally ends the war, or is it going to be the ultimate catalyst that ignites it? That's the huge question hanging over the world right now. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the data and keep learning.